Hello and welcome back, and today we're going to talk about another QNAP NAS. I know I've said that a lot recently, but we are learning more and more about the QNAP NAS releases coming presumably next year in the next refresh of their system devices. And although the current generation of their systems are doing pretty darn well, it's always good to know what's coming up in case a number of us are sitting on the fence wondering, should I lay out some whack now or should I hold on a little bit longer? And maybe this will be the answer to that question for you. Today I want to talk about another one of their more niche releases. To be honest, these are the ones that we're learning about more than anything else, because these are the ones that generally get overlooked by a lot of people. And this is part of their 3-bay series of devices. That's right, a number of you probably aren't even aware that QNAP has a range of 3-bay NAS solutions in their portfolio. This is sort of the third or fourth generation that we're looking at here, and although we don't have all the information on it, and what information we do have should always be taken with a pinch of salt, because none of it has come in any kind of official announcement, but it has come from official sources that I've unfortunately leaked online, for them at least. This is a solution from them that I think could be the best 3-bay they've put out, and I think will also finally serve as a decent middle ground between buyers that have been looking at 2-bay NASs and looking at 4-bay NASs and wondering, oh, I wish there was something in between. So this is the TS-364. It is a 3-bay NAS, but I say 3, it's kind of technically a 5-bay. It is a 3 SATA hard drive bay NAS, but it also has 2 NVMe SSD bays inside. That's right. So you can store 3 hard drives, a traditional architecture. Again, lots of hard drives out there. SATA is typically currently available at about 18 TB with 20 TB drives dancing around there on the horizon. And on top of that, you can install M2 NVMe's inside to be utilized for caching, for tiered storage, or as their own independent storage pool and take advantage of some of those lovely fast speeds. But it's worth bearing in mind that a 3-bay NAS, although it sounds like a great idea, is always going to be met with some degree of difficulty. And one of the areas of difficulty in a 3-bay NAS is simply how the system kind of divvies up its available resources internally, because you can't just slam any old bits of media in a NAS and it will work. You have to take advantage of PCIe lanes that are built into a CPU and the chipset, and these allow you to use as much or as little of different services. So when you look at a 2-bay or a 4-bay, they actually use a different number of CPU, PCIe lanes. And on a 3-bay, you're kind of savagely chopping and dividing them up in a very awkward fashion. The result is that 3-bay NASs, even particularly looking at the generations that QNAP have released previously, always have somewhat quirky hardware. And in some areas you feel like they've clipped wings, and in others they've gone and bundled in. And the TS-364 is very much an example of that. Everything we've learned so far about the 64 series from QNAP, we're kind of getting a good understanding about what their targets are. And the 364 is an odd example of that. So the CPU inside this device is actually one of 3 that have been listed. It's the N5105, the N5095, and the N5095A. Now, a lot of this is to do with Intel refreshing CPUs like it's going out of fashion. Intel recently has been jumping around in their CPU chipsets so much that I think a lot of brands, and this doesn't just apply to NASs, have had to be a little bit more open about the CPUs they're going to utilize. Now, those 3 CPUs I've mentioned, they're all 2.0 gigahertz quad-core processors that can be burst up to 2.9 gigahertz. They've all got a near identical, with incredibly small differences in video handling in the embedded UHD graphics component of these, with virtually no difference really in encoding, decoding, and media handling. But there is tiny amount of power usage differences that you, the end user, will never really feel. So I can understand how these brands have felt comfortable to talk about slight variations of availability on the CPU with their systems, because regardless of which one you get, on the face of it, they are near enough identical on an architectural level, and in terms of your overall experience utilizing the system, you're never going to know the difference. So those 3 CPUs, all of them rate quite highly on CPU Benchmark. It is worth highlighting again that of the three, the one that utilises the least power looks like the N5105. And by power, I don't just mean clock speed, I mean general watts per utilisation, but you're not really going to feel that. On top of that, they all support, and the 364 as a whole supports DDR4 memory with 4 gig arriving by default that can be upgraded up to a potential 16 gig across 2 slots, which is always good to hear. That system again means with that Intel Celeron CPU and the DDR4 16 gig of memory max, this is going to be great for pretty much all of the QNAP services, from virtualization to QVR Pro surveillance to Plex Media Server as well on the third party, containers, Ubuntu, Hyper, backup, you name it, this NAS is going to be able to do it. I don't think it's going to have the architecture by any meaningful way that it could possibly support the ZFS QUTS platform, but I think it will support the myriad of other services available in QTS version 5 that we reviewed quite recently. But it's when you look at the architecture of the connections on this box where things get a little bit out of whack. Unlike a lot of the other 64 series that we've seen so far, this NAS only has a single LAN port. It's a 2.5 GBE port, which is great, something we've seen from the majority of QNAP releases in the last couple of years. But still, nonetheless, that is a shame that we're not seeing at least 2 ports on there, or even a potential 10 GBE. Why are we not seeing that? Because of the CPU lane limitations that I talked about there at the start of the video. On top of that, there is an HDMI port, much like the other 64 series, and any kind of Celeron based power system there, or Celeron for you guys that are going to complain in the comments. But it's an HDMI 1.4B, so that's 1080p at 60 frames, but 4K at 30 frames. So again, we're seeing where they clip the wings a little bit on the available architecture to allow this 3-base system to have its kind of 2-tier storage middle point between 2 and 4-base systems, and kind of flesh out the lineup in the series from QNAP there. In terms of localized connectivity, it does have USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports, which is great to hear, because I don't know about you guys, but no matter how many times I scream at you to talk about having at least 2 backups, not just the NAS and a backup, but the NAS and 2 backups, localized USB that you can connect and periodically back up to and remove, or just have it connected in one way or a fashion, just to have for your snapshot or for whole system or whole folder or whole pool backups. There's no harm in that. And the USB 3.2 Gen 2 with its 10 gigabits per second connectivity is great to see here on these more affordable NAS systems, where we've kind of got used to USB 3.2 Gen 1 or 5 gigabit being the limit. And also with the QNAP platform supporting KVM, keyboard video mount, in conjunction with that HDMI, as well as a larger degree of connected USB peripherals, from USB to 5 GBE network ports, and a number of, outside of QNAP, we're starting to see from companies like D-Link, Wi-Fi 6 to USB adapters arriving on the market. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see even more supported peripherals for network and storage arriving, where 10 gigabit per second USB connectivity becomes quite advantageous. So that's really it for this 3-bay. Once again, we know nothing of its price. We know nothing for when it's going to be released. It may even be a release that never leaves China, because a lot of solutions from QNAP, we've noticed more and more over the last 12 months that some of their devices, where before they're brought to market, they look regionally about where it's going to benefit most and then target certain areas. This feels like one of those releases that could be on the cusp. 3-bays have always been quite niche, and although I've always quite liked them, I've always said that in my videos, I know they're not for everyone. And of all the 3 niche releases I've talked about recently, in the HS-264, the TBS-464, and this, the TS-364, and all being quite niche, this to me is the most niche of the 3, and one that we may not see here in the UK, and maybe in the US we'll have to wait and see. But overall, I am looking forward to this, and in terms of release, again, think 2022. We might hear about these officially from QNAP before the end of 2021. I think it would be unlikely to see these in any physical sense before the end of the year. I think we are looking at breadcrumb details of a 2022 series, but hopefully I'm wrong. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, click like. It helps me understand what you guys like me to talk about here on the channel. If you've enjoyed this and want to learn more about this and other new QNAPs as they arrive, click subscribe. And of course, take advantage of the free advice section over on NAS Compares. And again, it's linked to the description as well as a page dedicated to this NAS and the other NASs we've talked about recently, where we will regularly update with more information that we learn about newer generation of QNAPs. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.